We have a very special episode today with a special guest. We have Lorenzo Simonelli, Baker Hughes CEO, and Jamie and I can't even believe, first of all, that we're sitting here in the boardroom. Never in a million years would I think our podcast would ever get to the point where we get to interview Lorenzo. So we are super excited, and just thank you for having taken the time to even answer us and agree to come on the podcast. It really shows how much you care about the industry to, be on a podcast for the younger generation to tune in.
Pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lorenzo. So, we were just talking before we actually started, and I really want to dive into where you came from and like what your childhood was like. And we know that you're originally from Tuscany, Italy. This is a place where I would assume most people wouldn't want to leave. I know coming from Houston to Italy, I believe it's a beautiful place. And your family actually had a business there, with olive oil and wine and all the goods. So what made you actually leave that area and follow your father, who actually moved y'all to London, where you learned more about the business world? How did that go about? And tell us a little bit about yourself growing up.
So I think it starts by always being adventurous, and my father was the first person in his family that said, look, agriculture is great, but I want to see more of the world, and I actually want to experience different things. And he's the one that actually moved into banking and brought us along to London, and I think I got a lot from him with regards to the aspect of being more adventurous and actually looking beyond the traditions of just Tuscany. Tuscany is a beautiful place,
Yes.
but at the end it's good to also see other areas of the world and also other sectors, and that's what I've had the good fortune of doing, following living in London and then being educated there and then also traveling around the world.
That's awesome. So growing up, did you have aspirations to ever become a CEO or, run a multi-billion-dollar company and worldwide? Were those things that you think even like through your childhood or teenage years where you thought, I'm going to be, a big shot one day? Or was it not in your cards, you think, when you were younger?
So I think I always had the aspiration of being a big shot, and I think as you're growing up and you're watching TV and you're watching these movies of what people are doing, and at the time, if you look at the era, banking was it. It was when syndicated loans were being done. It's when there was a boom with regards to Japanese banking. And so I looked at what my father had been doing, and first of all, I thought, I'm going to go into banking, financing. I actually enjoy the aspect of looking at companies and seeing how they're performing from a financial standpoint. And I always aspired to run something. And, the way it went was I started actually out in banking, and pretty soon I got bored of the paper element of banking, which is you see a lot of big numbers, but you're really not involved in the operations in the day-to-day. And so I used my financing background to really get into operations and get into a multinational.
Well, so back to your college life, you actually went in and got your economics degree, correct?
That is correct.
And was this all based on wanting to go into banking?
Yes, so I started out actually, and it was very calculated. Why did I go to Cardiff University? At that time, Japanese banks were very big in the UK, and they actually had a program with Cardiff University. So I was working part-time for Mitsubishi Bank, and I went and did my undergraduate degree in Cardiff Business School. And then from there, I worked every summer for Mitsubishi and started proceeding as if I was going to go into banking. And then in '94, that soon changed. But anyhow, that's how it started out.
Well, when you went over to GE, you were on the fast track immediately. So what do you think your college prepared you to be that successful when you first started out? Or do you think there's some kind of attribute or something that you learned during your schooling that kind of brought you to be, somebody of that nature?
So schooling definitely helped. At the end of the day, it provides the foundations that you can always go back to. But I think the biggest experience was actually working part-time and then also getting into General Electric and undertaking a entry program there, the financial management program. And it's very different when you put into practice what you've been taught. And you actually learn that much of what you've been taught, you have to adapt and you have to change. And situations in real life, hardly ever a textbook. And so that was a great learning as I went into General Electric.
So we know in 1994 is when you joined GE, and only shortly, 13 years into the company, you were named CEO and president of GE Transportation, which is a very short time frame, I believe, for somebody to get to that level. I have like, what, 5-6 years left for to be CEO somewhere. It's not common. So what do you think were the attributes, or what do you think led you to be named that? Like, was it 13 years of crazy hard work, of you putting yourself out there and working really hard, or like, what do you think differentiated you? And then also, do you remember at the time when you were named, was there some negative feedback maybe from the older generation, thinking this guy's too young, he doesn't know how to run a business, which I'm sure happened?
So it's funny when you say 13 years, because when you're actually going through it, you don't really look at the 13 years, and you're taking step by step. And I've been very fortunate, I think, that through my training, but then also through the audit staff that I went on to in GE, I was on an accelerated pathway. But I was always curious. I was always curious in learning more. I was adaptable, flexible, and also delivered on results. So you actually make the progress, and you say you've only got 5 years. You're going to see that as you're working diligently day in, day out. I've never asked for a job. I've always been given an opportunity to me, and I've always said, let's do what I do today well, and have aspirations, but always think about what you're doing today and execute on what you can control, and then always be open to learning and have that curiosity. And I think that's what maybe differentiated me from others is I wasn't too worried about where will I be in 10 years' time. I was more worried about what am I doing today that's going to be constructive? Am I achieving the results that are necessary? And then career takes care of itself.
Were you ever offered a position and then you turned it down?
Nope. I've actually never had that situation, and I've always followed the guidance of people around me. So, I've had the opportunity to move 27 times in my career. I've lived in multiple cities in the United States. Some that people would say, why did you go to Erie, Pennsylvania, or Cleveland, Ohio, Louisville, Kentucky? And they've all been great experiences. And one thing I've learned as well is there's always something good about every location you go to. And you've always got to make the most of the situation that you're in.
I like that a lot. Well, let's go back to the journey of merging GE Oil and Gas and Baker Hughes in 2017. I mean, these are two massive companies. I've been a part of a merger myself, especially not at your level, of course, but I've known as an employee what it feels like. There's two different cultures. You got two different visions when you do this. So knowing what you know now, like, what would you have done differently then, going through that process? And at the time, I'm sure whatever y'all were doing, you felt like was right, right at that time. But you learn as you go. So is there anything you can share with us that maybe you would have changed?
So it's an interesting story because when you look back, we actually started to engage with Baker Hughes in 2015, 2016 as they were going through a potential merger acquisition by Halliburton. And at GE Oil and Gas, we'd always felt that it was important to increase our presence in oilfield services to provide our customers with the wing-to-wing capability of equipment and services from the exploration all the way to the production to the liquefaction. So in 2016, when the acquisition by Halliburton of Baker Hughes didn't take place, we saw a unique opportunity to engage in merger discussions, and we saw this proposal for our customers to be a differentiated energy technology company, which really played through the value chain and brought together some great competence. Looking at the integration, we finally went onto New York Stock Exchange in July of 2017, and I think everybody's very cautious of not moving quickly. Everybody wants to be, careful about stepping on each other's feet, and we had a great technology bias and a great history within both companies of engineering and technology and know-how. So we used that as being the linchpin. The one thing looking back is you can never move fast enough. It's actually better to bring the cultures together and use the synergies to actually enable a new culture to be developed. And we very quickly started to say, look, this isn't GE Oil and Gas, this isn't just Baker Hughes, this is Baker Hughes, an energy technology company. And we went through a roller coaster year where there were changes that took place also in our parent company at the time, General Electric, which then brought us closer together. And so, very quickly we made the culture one within Baker Hughes.
That must have been a very difficult time, I'm sure, of stress and the media and speculations of what's going on, but you guys got it through it, so that's good. So let's talk about something that we really love, which is social media, and I would say the millennials or a lot of the employees at Baker, we love LinkedIn, we love social media, Instagram, YouTube. That's where I would say the majority of people spend their time, is on their phone, watching what other people are doing. You're very active on LinkedIn and on other platforms, which is rare, right? Not even just in oil and gas, but just in general. I would say most C-level executives or CEOs of other companies, they're kind of, I wouldn't say afraid of it, but they don't like to put themselves out there necessarily because it's not something that was done in the past. So they might see it as negative, or maybe we shouldn't be out there, but you're obviously there and it works, right? People love, especially your employees that we've talked to, they love how present you are, right? People across the whole world feel like they know you in a way because you're always posting, you're talking about how you feel about certain subjects on LinkedIn. So first of all, why do you think it's important? Why do you put yourself out there? And do you feel like sometimes there's a little bit of not backlash, but some negative feedback maybe from other people thinking like, he's on social media all day, or he's always posting, not that it's a very positive thing, but I think maybe they see that they're not doing it.
So social media and being active is part of the role. And I'm very fortunate, it's not me doing it all the time. I do have a team that also helps me. But I also myself personally go onto LinkedIn every day, and I make sure that if there's something that I'm interested in, and I can comment on it, but then I have a team that also helps me. It's always better to be open and engaged in a discussion than be hidden away. And I think especially as a leader of a big company in an important industry such as energy, we have to be vocal. And we have to accept that there'll be people that are critical of it. At the same time, it's better to engage in that dialogue. And it's part and parcel, I think, of the way in which the world has evolved as well. And I find it a great way to actually communicate with the employee base, communicate with different stakeholders, and it's part of the engagement process. I learned early on that one thing people want is communication. They want transparent, unfiltered communication, and they want to feel that you stand for something. They may not agree with it, but at least they know you have a point of view. And I think it's important as leaders that we have followers, and we actually lead by example by having a point of view and being able to debate it and actually have a discussion around the industry that's so important. So that's why we've taken on the view that we should be out there, we should be profiling the energy transition, different topics around diversity, equity, inclusion, also what's happening in the world, and that's why I think it's part and parcel what we need to do.
I think it too brings a real life, situation to those that don't maybe know you personally, and employees can feel like that connection to you because they feel like they know you because you're on social media. And with that, a lot of millennials, they love to know what people do all day. I mean, I swear that probably the most watched videos on YouTube are like, what do you eat in a day? What do you do all day? How does your day go? So let's look at your day. What is a ritual? I'm sure your day's ever changing because you're a global company, you travel around the world, but what is something that you could say is from, you wake up at 3 to you do at 5, what does a day look like for you? What's something that you commonly do no matter what?
So my days vary depending if I'm here in Houston or I'm traveling globally. I try and keep a regular rhythm though. So I will wake up early, and I'm more of a morning person than I am a night person. And I wake up early and I go to the gym.
What's early?
Early is 3:15 in the morning.
Okay.
Now, that's not for everybody, but again, I said I'm more a morning
Yeah.
person than a night person. So, but I wake up and I find the best way to get the day going is by going to the gym. So I'll do either an instructor or I'll do aerobics, and I'll do various things until about 4:30. Then I'll get ready and I'll be in the office normally by 5:30, 5:45, and actually kick off the day with some of the global locations. And I'll be speaking to Asia, I'll be having employee roundtables, I'll be interacting with customers, and then as the day goes through in the morning, it will be from Asia to the Middle East to Europe, and then again interactions with both employees as well as then customers. And I'd say the majority of the middle of the day is spent on Houston time zone. And so it will be interacting again with the stakeholders here in Houston as well as customers and within North America. And then I'll end the day normally either with an employee engagement or with a customer reception. And then I try and limit the number of dinners and then go home and relax and get refreshed for the next day.
Do you eat during the day though? Do you have time to actually eat lunch and stuff like that? Or are you always like running from one thing to the next?
So I try and stay relatively light at lunchtime because if you're having a reception or a dinner, then it's,
that night.
But definitely eat. I mean, I think it's important to remain balanced.
Yes.
And so exercise in the morning, get a good nutritious shake or something in the morning, and then light lunch, and then I'll have dinner.
I love that.
That sounds awesome. Well, everybody, if you want to be CEO, you should start waking up at 3:15. So start practicing early.
It's not for everybody. And there's many people I know that decide to work late at night.
Oh, I just had a newborn, so I'm up at that time anyway. So I just need to just keep on going and working out afterwards. So you've inspired me.
That's awesome. All right, so let's talk about diversity and inclusion, which is a topic that we really enjoy and love sharing on the podcast. What do you think companies should be doing in order to change a little bit more of the perception of the outside of that, oil and gas is male dominated and women don't belong? Even though, we are in 2021, that vision has definitely changed, but I think the numbers aren't necessarily there yet across their whole industry. What do you think are some things that in general the industry needs to do, and then what are some things that Baker has done or is doing to help the diversity of your employees as well as retain females? Because one of the things that we noticed was a lot of women come into the industry, right? You go recruit them when they're young, right out of school, but we see a lot of women fall off on their path between that 10-year mark or 5 to 10-year mark, which is usually when they have kids, when life gets a little bit harder because they have to focus on a baby or maternity leave or things like that. What are things that you guys are doing to kind of help retain that talent?
So from a personal standpoint, I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is a foundation of any good company. And it's hard not to look at the oil and gas industry and say that we are a little backwards in our thinking. And also we do have a challenge with having diversity in the workforce. So at Baker Hughes, what we've said is, look, number one, the best decisions and the best company comes from having a diverse workforce and treating everybody with equity and also being inclusive to all realms of society. When it comes specifically to diversity, we need more role models, just like yourselves. Mm-hmm. And we need role models to be able to chart also the success for other generations that come afterwards. So what we try and do is highlight, we have a women's network, we try and be very inclusive in the discussion of how can we make it an easier place to work in, and how can we make a support structure which means you don't lose the people after 5 to 10 years. And there's no reason why we should. Mm-hmm. Again, you have the reality of life, but you have the opportunity to give flexible work arrangement. You have the opportunity to support and also provide encouragement. And that's what we want to do. I mean, our view is that we should never leave anybody behind. Mm-hmm. And we should always support them and nurture them and also make them successful. And that comes from a real focus on diversity at Baker Hughes.
Yeah, I really like that. Going back to a time where you actually had an interview with Houston Chronicle, you mentioned, I've been fortunate in being at places at the right time and also taking good advice. What is the best advice you've been given?
So that Houston Chronicle article is very true. There's an element of luck that comes into a career. And you can be always executing and determined. You also have to have some good luck of being in the right place at the right time and being noticed and having champions that endorse you that you may not even know. And I've been fortunate that that's happened. But I'd say the best advice was actually from my father, who said, you can decide to be a donkey in your life or you can decide to do something with it. And I wouldn't say I was the easiest of children to deal with, but it resonated with regards to he stepped out, moved away from Tuscany, went into banking, and really said, you can do whatever you want if you put your mind to it. And so that determination of wanting to do something with my life came in very early on.
So a quick question on how do you deal, I know we always ask this, but how do you deal with work-life balance, especially as a CEO, dealing with several countries, things are changing 24/7. At the end of the day, everyone looks at you for being responsible for anything that happens with the company. So, I know it's hard to probably sleep at night for a lot of CEOs because their companies or their business is constantly on their mind of how they're improving, how they can make it better, or how do you manage just like sanity, and also like the family aspect of, maybe your wife who's home later on waiting for you to get back from dinner. How does that work?
So I think anybody who says that there is a formula for work-life balance is probably false in their statement. It is very individualistic, and I find myself being very comfortable with the way in which I lead my life daily, and also the way in which I balance family, my wife, the whole situation at home, but it is very tailored to individuals, and so there is no secret recipe. When I need to prioritize family, I prioritize family. When I need to prioritize work, I prioritize work. At the end of the day, you have to have the self-confidence of a good team around you, and also the self-confidence of not needing to be involved in everything. And so I feel very confident that we've got a good strategy at Baker Hughes. We're executing on it. And also, I sleep very well in the evenings, at night, just knowing that we can get stuff done and having the good team around you. So, it's something you've got to be able to do yourself. And nobody's got a solution for you. It's very much individualistic.
What I like is the trusting part. You do have to trust those people that you put in place, and those are the reasons why you have them in place, so that you can walk away and the business can run without you technically having your hands in everything every day. So that's very true. On that topic, we'll move into, what measurements, organizational changes are you putting in place to make sure that Baker Hughes is and continues to be at the leading edge of the energy transition? As we know, that's like it's a really big topic right now. That's, ever since COVID has happened, I feel like, OFS companies have just skyrocketed in like what they're going to be doing and how they're going to be changing in order to meet the demands. So what have y'all done currently?
So if you look at our background, we came out strongly in 2019 with our net zero commitment. I think we were one of the first, and we said that by 2050 we would be net zero, by 2030 we would halve our emissions, and we brought down our emissions by 32% since our 2012 baseline. And we are not an oilfield services company, we're an energy technology company. And our purpose statement is really to provide energy which is sustainable, reliable, clean for the people and the planet. And it's a very strong statement because it also plays into our portfolio. We can help our customers reduce their carbon footprint, and not just within oil and gas, but across multiple industries. When you go to heavy metals, you go to cement, you go to pulp and paper. And so our purpose is really to look at what we do today, do it more efficiently. And we have the first pillar of our strategy being transform the core. Second is invest for growth, which is new areas where new equipment upgrades, we've got composite pipes, we've got digital operations that we're investing in, and then you've got new frontiers of hydrogen, CCUS, fuel cells, energy storage. So with these three pillars, we really help our customers along the journey of net zero. That's the purpose that we have.
So with a lot of changes, obviously, in the last year of pivoting business and changes, we heard from your team earlier today that you guys have decided to be a little bit more flexible, and you can choose, if your business makes sense, to stay home and work from home and have that flexibility of coming into the office. Obviously not if you're in a manufacturing plant or out on the rig, but if you can work from your laptop, that's something the company wants to be flexible in, which I think is great, coming from years and years and years of no, everybody needs to be at the office from 9 to 5 and all that. So how did you guys come across deciding that? Did you do surveys, or how did you figure that out? And then why do you think flexibility matters for the employees?
So I think we learned a lot during the pandemic, And I think COVID-19 taught us the importance of our field service support, because give them a lot of credit. They were out there with the customers. Our people in manufacturing were there, and we didn't lose a day of work. At the same time, the pandemic also taught us the technology that can be used in other areas to work remotely. And I think it's an ecosystem that is going to be here going forward as well, where there's going to be the aspects of you have to be at work sometimes, especially if you're trying to co-create and actually think about strategy and think about the new opportunities of collaboration. At the same time, if you're just doing a daily activity, you can do that from home. Our purpose is to provide the flexibility, the tools, and the capability for people to manage what they need to manage. I'm not going and checking, okay, is this person in the office 8 hours? I'm not checking. At the end of the day, it's the deliverables that need to be achieved. And as long as people are achieving those deliverables, that's the way it should be done. That being said, unfortunately, there are some jobs where we have to be at the site, either at the customer site or the manufacturing floor, and I give a lot of credit to our teams, because throughout the pandemic they did that, and going forward, we haven't lost a day of operations.
That's awesome. I think at least as the younger generation, for almost everybody that I've talked to that has had the opportunity to work from home, it is really valuable because we feel like we could just get more things done. Family is easier, so I think overall, happy employees will be a happy business. So I think it's awesome. I think more companies should definitely.
We did a lot of surveys, and I think the pendulum will shift as we go forward, back and forth somewhat, and then it will balance in the middle. Not everybody has the same situations at home, and so coming into the office is actually more beneficial, more space, especially as you go globally as well, different characteristics. So I think the word that we use a lot is flexibility. And I think everybody has to understand what's the flexibility that they need to manage all the different things going on in their daily lives.
I like that. The flexibility is a huge part. So lastly, we do have a lot of young people who listen to the podcast. We have some people that are already in college right now, or we have some that have already graduated with petroleum engineering degrees that might be wondering what they're going to do next. What is your advice to those in the industry, or those maybe wanting to still come in, or maybe they need to pivot somewhere else because of what's going on in the energy transition? Do you still feel that there's a need for people with those type of degrees that we have commonly seen come into the OFS sector? And I know you mentioned Baker Hughes is now more of an energy company. You do a lot more stuff than just directly oil and gas. But as far as the future of oil and gas, where do you think that lies with the people that the next generation coming in?
Look, I think it's fundamental that we continue to recruit, attract the talent. And we're at an interesting point. We talk about the energy transition, we talk about the opportunity to meet net zero. There's three realities that we see at Baker Hughes. The first is that the move towards net zero, climate, and the backdrop of also the view that we need to reduce carbohydrates and also the use of different fuels is going to accelerate. We need to definitely have the investments there. At the same time, hydrocarbons are going to be used for the next few decades, and we've got to have good people within the sector to be able to reduce the carbon footprint of those hydrocarbons. And the third reality is we've got to do it in partnership. And if people forget that energy is fundamental to the way the world operates, we're going to have a challenge. I think it's we've lost some of the narrative of where people think you can just turn on a switch and nothing else is happening and they have electricity. It's fundamental that we balance out that narrative, and hydrocarbons are here to stay for the next few decades. It's an evolution, it's a journey, it's not a radical overnight, and it's important that we keep the best talent coming into this industry.
I agree. And just to that point, I remember just coming into oil and gas at the beginning, people would always say, why are you going to that industry? I feel like for years they've always said it's dead. There's only 10 years left, right? Even throughout all the last 40, 50 years. But I would always say, as an engineer or as anybody who wants to solve problems, this is where you should be. You should come to the industry that's the most challenging, that has, quote unquote, the issues that we need to clean up or whatever, and come make a difference here. Why go to the easier way? So yeah, for all the people listening, oil and gas is obviously a great place. This is why Jamie and I love it so much, why we have this podcast. But yes, there's so much future in it, and there's so much to evolve in the next 10, 15 years, so come be part of it, is what I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lorenzo, thank you so much for being on today. We really appreciate you taking the time to, come talk to us today.
It's been a real pleasure, and congratulations to both of you.